Hi children, today we are starting our new chapter Force and Laws of Motion. First we are discussing about force. What is force? You have studied in the 8th class. Do you remember the chapter Force and Pressure? In that chapter you studied about the definition of force. Can you say? Yes, force is just a push or pull. Force is a push or pull, right? Force is a push or a pull on an object. This definition can be related with motion. How? How can we relate it with motion? When someone pushes an object or pulls an object, that is a force. Okay, but that is not only force. What are the effects of force? That also you studied in the 8th class. What are the changes can be made on object by applying a force? By applying a force on an object, we can change the motion of an object, we can change the shape of an object, we can increase or decrease the speed of an object, we can stop the motion of an object, we can change the direction and shape of an object. Okay, these are the effects of force. But this not explain the concept of force entirely. Before we move on to the definition of force, let's do some activity. This ball is lying on the ground and it is at rest. Okay, it is stationary, not moving at all. This ball is not moving. Is there any force acting on this ball? Listen, in 8th standard you studied contact force and non-contact forces. That is muscular force, frictional force, gravitational force, electrostatic force, etc. By analyzing these forces, that is the gravitational force, electrostatic force, frictional force and muscular force, are there any forces acting on the ball at rest? Are there any forces acting on the ball at rest? The answer is yes. There are forces acting on this ball. There is gravitational force. That means the gravitational force is a downward force. It acts in downward direction. It pulls the ball into the center of earth. And the ground is applying a force on the ball also, and that force is in upward direction. That is, the gravitational force is in downward direction and the ground applies a force on the ball is in upward direction. That is opposite to the gravitational force, and the force acted in upward direction is called normal force. Okay. This normal force is opposite to the gravitational force. So here there are two forces acting on the ball, that is normal force in upward direction and gravitational force in downward direction. But the ball does not move. Why? Because the forces in upward direction and in downward direction are equal. Here the forces in upward direction and in downward direction are equal. So the ball does not move in upward direction and does not move in downward direction. That means here the normal force and gravitational force acting on the ball are opposite in direction, and these two forces are equal. These two normal force and gravitational force are opposite in direction and also equal. So we can say that the normal force and gravitational force are balanced here. Here the normal force and gravitational force are acting equal and opposite in direction, so they are balanced. Okay, that is the net force acting on the ball is 0. So the ball does not move. In order to move the ball, there has to be some net force. Okay, that is, if the net force is equal to 0, the object will not move. That is the balanced force. Okay, if the net force not equal to 0, then the object will move. That is the unbalanced force. If the net force equal to 0, then it is balanced force, and if the net force is not equal to 0, then it is unbalanced force. Let's see another example to understand the balanced and unbalanced forces in detail. Do you see tug of war? In tug of war, there are two teams. How many teams? There are two teams. These two teams pull the rope into their own side. That means these two teams are pulling the rope in opposite direction. Here in this picture, you can see the blue team has 5 men and the green team has 5 men. Okay, both the team has 5 men. Then who will win the game? No team. Yes, no team will win the game because they are applying equal forces, because there are 5 men in green team and 5 men in blue team. So they are applying equal forces and they are applying the force in opposite direction. Okay, so the net force here will be 0. So the forces applied by the two teams will get cancelled and the net force will be 0. And the net force will be 0. Then what is called that force? That is the balanced force. That is here acting the balanced force. The two teams are applying the same force in opposite direction but no change. So we can say that balanced forces cannot change the state of rest and balanced forces cannot change the state of motion of body, and balanced forces cannot change the speed of a body. Balanced forces cannot change the direction of a body, but there is an exceptional case in the shape of an object. That is, the balanced force can change the shape of an object. Isn't it? Balanced force cannot change the state of motion, state of rest, speed and direction, but the balanced force can change the shape of an object. Isn't it? How is it possible? Can you explain with an example? Yes, look at this picture. Here, an inflated balloon is pressed by a person in his hands. He exerting equal and opposite forces with his hands. Okay, what happens then? The shape of the balloon changes when the person press the balloon and exerting equal and opposite forces with his hands. The shape of the balloon changes. In this example, the forces are balanced because equal and opposite forces are exerted with his hands on the balloon. Okay, so the forces are balanced, and this balanced force changes the shape of balloon. Isn't it? The shape of the balloon changes by pressing the balloon with the person by his hands. Isn't it? Okay, so we can say that the balanced forces can change the shape of an object. Okay, so hope you understand the balanced forces. Then we are coming back to the example of tug of war. Let's see another picture of tug of war. That is, here there are 4 men in the green team and 3 men in the blue team. Who will win? The 4 men in the green team or 3 men in the blue team? Can you guess? Yes, the green team will win. You can clearly see from the picture the green team will win. Why? Because there are more number of men in green team than in blue team. So, more force is exerted by the green team. Then the rope will move towards the green team. More force is exerted by the green team, so the rope will move towards the green team. Here, the forces are not balanced. Okay, that is, the rope moves towards the green team, so the forces are not balanced. More force is exerted by the green team than blue team. So the forces are not balanced, or we can say that it is unbalanced force. There exerts in this picture, the forces are unbalanced. There exerts unbalanced force. What is unbalanced force? If unequal forces acting in opposite direction. Okay, if unequal forces acting in opposite direction are called unbalanced force, and equal forces acting in opposite direction is the balanced force. Unequal forces acting in opposite direction are called unbalanced force. Then there will be effect of force. Okay, unbalanced force make effect of force. Let's see another picture. In this picture, the two boys are applying equal forces in opposite direction. That is, the table will not move. Here the boys are applying equal forces in opposite direction on the table. So the table will not move. That is the balanced force, because it exerts equal forces in opposite direction. So that is the balanced force. In this picture, the two boys are pushing the one side of table. Here the two boys are pushing the one side of table. Then the table moves. Why? Because unequal forces are applying. So that is the unbalanced force. The unbalanced force can change the state of rest. The unbalanced force can change the state of motion. The unbalanced force can change the speed of motion of an object. And unbalanced force can change the direction of motion. And unbalanced force can change the shape of an object. Okay, let's discuss the unbalanced force in detail. Okay, hope you understand the balanced force and unbalanced force. If equal forces are applied in opposite direction, that is balanced force. If unequal forces are applied in opposite direction, that is unbalanced force. Okay, let's discuss the unbalanced force in detail. Okay, now let a person kick a ball. What happens then? Yes, the ball moves. That is, the position of the ball changes. Why? Why did the ball move? It's because the net force is not equal to 0 here. Hope you understand. It's because the net force is not equal to 0 here, and this time the forces are not balanced. That means the forces are unbalanced. So the ball moves here. Then you can see the ball moves and slowly comes to stop. Okay, here the ball stops after some time. Why? That is, when we push the ball means we are applying a force on the ball. So there acts a force on other side, that is opposite to our push. So which force acts opposite to this? And this force stops the ball. Which force made the ball stops? Yes, it was the frictional force. This frictional force always acts opposite to the motion of the ball. Isn't it? You can see that the frictional force acting opposite to the motion of the ball. We are applying the force towards the left, then the frictional force acting towards the right. Okay, that means these two forces are acting in opposite direction. So here the ball moves. So the applied force is not equal to the frictional force. Here we are applying a force on the ball more than the frictional force. So the ball moves. Okay, that is we are pushing the ball more than the frictional force of the ground. So the ball moves. But when we push the ball less than the frictional force of the ground, when we apply the force on the ball less than the frictional force of the ground, then the ball what will happen? Then the ball moves or not? Then the ball did not move. Okay. Here the ball cannot move if the applied force is less than the frictional force. Suppose if the applied force is equal to 10 Newton. You know the unit of force is Newton. So if the applied force is equal to 10 Newton and the frictional force is equal to 5 Newton, then is it moves or not? Is the body moves or not? Yes, the body moves. That is, here the applied force on the ball is 10 Newton and the frictional force is 5 Newton. That is, the applied force is greater than the frictional force. So, it is an unbalanced force. Okay, hope you understand that. Let's look at another example. That is, when we pedal a bicycle, it moves because the applied force is greater than the frictional force. That means we are applying a force on the pedal of the bicycle and the tire of the ground applying a frictional force opposite to this. When we pedal the bicycle, we are applying a force and that applied force must be greater than the frictional force. Then only the bicycle moves. So here the forces are unbalanced. When we stop pedaling the bicycle, what happens? It slows down. Isn't it? The bicycle slows down when we stop the pedaling the bicycle. Because what is the reason? Because the applied force on the pedal becomes zero. We are stopping to pedal the bicycle. So the applied force on the pedal becomes zero. That is less than the frictional force. So the frictional force opposes the motion of bicycle and the bicycle stops. Okay. Hope you understand this. So from these examples, we can understand that if the applied force is greater than the frictional force, the force is unbalanced. Okay. So hope you understand the difference between the balanced force and the unbalanced force. If the net force on the body is equal to 0, then it is balanced force. That is, equal forces are applied in opposite direction. It cannot change the state of rest, cannot change the state of motion, cannot change the direction of motion, but it can change the shape of an object. Then what is unbalanced force? If the applied force is greater than the frictional force, then it is unbalanced force. Unbalanced force can change the state of rest, it can change the state of motion, it can change the speed of motion, it can change the direction of motion, and it can change the shape of an object. Okay, these are all about force. Then what is force? Force is push or pull on an object. So, we can modify the definition of force. How? That is, force is a push or pull that changes the state of rest or motion of a body. Force is a push or pull that can change the state of rest or can change the motion of a body. But the force must be unbalanced. The force must be unbalanced, then only the state of rest or motion of a body can change. Okay, so hope you understand all. In the next class, we will discuss about the laws of motion. We will continue in the next class. Thank you.